and welcome to episode 77 of the Impulso podcast by Momentum Works. So today we have a special guest joining us, Shawn Teow, and this is also Shawn's first ever podcast.
Thank you.
So we're very honored to have him today. So Shawn was previously in Aspire as an early employee before leaving to co-found Upmesh as its COO, leading the commercial direction to grow it across 4 countries while processing over US $150 million GMV annually and raising US $11 million in the process. So his latest adventure, which is also in the live commerce space, is Hitwave, a B2B startup that connects live sellers in Southeast Asia with cross-border brands. So Shawn has had a lot of experience in live commerce in Southeast Asia, which is why we thought we would invite him today to have a conversation about the current status of live commerce in Southeast Asia, what are some of the challenges faced in the region, as well as who are some of the key players. So, hi Shawn.
Hello.
So let's start with the first question. So what do you think is the current status of live commerce in Southeast Asia?
Progress actually of live commerce across Southeast Asia is very patchy. Right? You have different countries practicing effectively different forms of live commerce, different qualities of live hosts, and their back-end operations as well as their front-end operations. And you also have different categories in play. There are some generalizable trends that you can see across the board, but it's still very patchy right now.
When you say things are patchy, how long has this status been? I mean, you got involved into live commerce way before TikTok Shop started actually sort of pushing this big time in Southeast Asia.
Yeah. So a bit of background here is that we started 2020. In 2020, there was already a small, but I think I would call it thriving live commerce scene across Southeast Asia, right? COVID did a lot to help to boost the performance as well as its viewership. And thankfully, unlike other industries, right, like for example, food delivery, right, the GMV didn't dip after the COVID lockdowns were lifted. So, sorry, what's the question again?
So, we say things are patchy, right? So has it always been a status, or it sort of evolved into this patchy state?
It started out patchy and it has just continued being patchy. That's what I argue, right? Because everybody started more or less with clothes. This was how the whole of Southeast Asia started. Everybody started more or less with clothes, right? But at different ASPs.
You mean selling like fashion items?
Yes.
Okay.
Different ASPs and also different hosts who are doing it and so on and so forth, right? And over time, it has become even patchier because they started to experiment with other categories, or some people didn't bother to experiment with other categories and they focus on growing the ASP of the products, right?
So ASP means average selling price?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And also some of them started to experiment with different content formats, right? As well as maybe expanding their back-end operations or their front-end operations. Different models of development. Even within just Singapore, it's such a tiny market in and of itself, right? There are effectively, I think, 2 or 3 different models that are ongoing right now. Then, notwithstanding also, then came the entrance of TikTok Shop, followed by the consequential decision by Shopee to kind of, fight back against TikTok Shop, right? And it has caused certain countries, like for example Vietnam, to leapfrog ahead of everybody else. Like previously in the past, when you were talking about things like Facebook live selling or live selling in general, it simply wasn't really much of a thing in Vietnam, right? Yes, you do have kids who are doing live on Shopee Live in Vietnam, right? But that's more of their side hustle. It's 100% all-in kind of effort to make a career or business out of it. But in the past 1-2 years, after all the investment in this space, whole MCNs are emerging inside Vietnam, where they are doing closest to the China style, doing things like 12-hour, 16-hour lives, entire factories or studios that are ongoing and doing live. So very interesting environment that we are in now, right? Ultimately, I do believe it will still cohere into a few standard models across the region. How long is it going to take? What form is it going to take in the end? Will it end up looking like the China form or something else uniquely Southeast Asian? I think the question is still up for debate.
So, we'll say that, I mean, you think it's a natural sort of evolution, right? When a new thing comes out, some people get excited, they try different things, and obviously because there's no sort of standard playbook that people can follow, that's why it sort of evolved into different things. And of course, I mean, different countries, they also have some kind of relative isolation in how the ecosystem is forming. So that's why you have like even more varieties of different models, different permutations. And you believe that, I mean, as a natural progression, right, either you would always have in this like a patchy state where, I mean, it's always chaos, right? But it could also become a case where a few sort of models, a few guys manage to sort of standardize, manage to like do it more efficiently compared to the rest, and they become top, and their model becomes sort of dominant. You think the market will consolidate?
If I had to bet, I would bet that a few standard models would evolve, right? Because I've already seen the diffusion happen. When I say the diffusion, I mean the diffusion of, say, for example, diffusion of live streaming operations or the live stream itself. Thailand was always the first pioneer in live selling, right? They have always the best GMV, the highest participation rate amongst the buyers. Effectively, largest live seller by GMV back then in 2021 would be a lady named Pimri Pai. But after some time, everybody started to see how Pimri Pai was doing her own live streams. People started to copy it as well. Right? Yes, bubbles do exist. You have the Thai social media bubble, the Vietnamese social media bubble, Indo social media bubble, but it will filter out inevitably. Right? And people will start saying, okay, this looks interesting, I can copy this, I can copy that. So there will start to be that kind of I would say that kind of coherence towards a standard few models. Right? And notwithstanding as well the fact that, so here's a very interesting phenomenon that I don't think many people know when we talk about diffusion. There's one channel of diffusion for Chinese practices to enter Southeast Asia, which is people who are from Southeast Asia selling into China. There's actually a shocking number of them. If you go to Bangkok, for example, you walk into Big C, there are a number of people who will be inside there at any one time doing live selling. Not all of them are from China. There are Thais who can speak fluent Chinese and are selling into China, right? You can go, like, okay, so for example, myself, right, I go to Chiang Mai pretty often. You can go to Chiang Mai, and there on the walking street or in JJ Market or all that, you will see a lot of Thais speaking fluent Chinese streaming on Douyin into China or Kuaishou into China.
What are they selling?
Fashion items, random curiosity things, right? Like a small carvings and all that. A lot of Thai food items.
Thai food items.
A lot.
But that's interesting because the last few years, you look at the Thai food restaurants in China, it actually started spreading. I mean, I remember in 2014 when I was in Beijing to look for a Thai food restaurant, you literally have to like work hard to look for it. But now it's everywhere. Like every mall would have like 1 or 2 Thai places, and the Vietnamese places started proliferating in Shanghai as well. So
when was the last time you were in Chiang Mai? Have you ever been to Chiang Mai?
I've been to Chiang Mai. The last time I was in Chiang Mai was probably 2012. 12 years ago.
Chiang Mai today,
it's very polluted, I know.
It looks like China.
I do hear lots of things about that, right? Because I personally know lots of people from Shanghai who moved to Chiang Mai.
Yeah.
So the living cost is cheaper. I mean, air quality is bad, but it was not that bad when they moved there. And international school is cheap.
Yes.
And just life is much more relaxed compared to what you would have in a top tier city in China.
2018 was the first time I went to Chiang Mai, right?
I went there earlier than you.
Yes. But after COVID, I only went back in 22.
Yeah.
18, when I went there, everything was written in Thai. 22, when I went there, everything was written in Mandarin. And to make things more extreme, there is a Chinese restaurant inside Chiang Mai, right? That's built like a tulou. And it's just called Tulou Restaurant, and it's huge. It's sitting at the outskirts.
To give you context, Tulou is kind of, in the past, this particular part of China, in the south, which were frequented by bandits. And they built these kind of fortresses where different generations of the same clan would live in.
It's mostly by the Hakka, right?
Yeah, it's mostly by the Hakka. If you watch the movie Mulan, and they lived in the Tulou, right? But anyway, so we diverged a bit.
Let's not diverge too much.
I think when I was in Hangzhou like 2 weeks ago, I was speaking to some of MCNs, and they said that some of their hosts are selling like Thai-themed stuff.
Yes.
Like, the unique and novel kind of items, and sometimes something related to food, agricultural products, right? And they said, oh, we figured out it's much better for our host to be in Thailand, actually walking in the market and doing a live rather than being stuck in a studio in Hangzhou. I mean, the conversion is higher when you put the host into a real setting.
This is a global phenomenon. It's a global phenomenon. I've seen this across Southeast Asia. Every live seller, wherever you're based, right? If you're based in Philippines, Indonesia, Vietnam, you can be importing goods and selling it and say that, oh, this is very unique and everything, right? Maybe your session GMV is between 5 to 10. The moment you just go overseas and you just, pan the camera and show I am overseas, overnight sales, it's insane, right? One I arranged was they were selling cosmetics made from so-called mud from Mount Fuji, right? We imported samples and we convinced some live streamers to do it. Maybe 1K, 2K in sales. Nothing to write
Like,
home about.
in which currency? Okay, USD. Okay.
USD, right? What changed was we brought one, put him by the leg at the foot of Mount Fuji, 80,000 US in sales, 1 hour.
I can see how AI can play in this, like creating like an artificial environment that you are in.
But if people know that it's an artificial environment
People
in the
wouldn't know.
background, would
I
you
mean-
have to disclose it though? If you're using AI.
No, but they will find ways to prove it. So like this one, they pan the camera, they show that it's true.
Yeah.
They say, can you hear the wind sound on the microphone, right? So that
I don't know. Why do you think that's the case though? Like, why do you think when they are at the actual location, is it a consumer mindset thing or?
okay, I used a bit of a more complicated English to explain this. Is living vicariously through others. So by seeing them there and it's there, it's like, wow, it's so interesting. They are really there. They really has that whole atmosphere of the feel to the live stream, right? That it's as if I'm doing virtual tourism. My bet, so 2.0 was during the COVID lockdown period, and 2.1 and 2.2 actually travel was still quite restricted, right? My bet was this kind of travel streaming would actually have died down after 2.2. I was totally and completely wrong. If anything, the GMV has just gone up. Yeah. It's also because my theory here is that simply because people have become accustomed or expect this kind of travel entertainment together with their live streams.
I have some friends who live in Europe. They're Chinese. They live in Europe, and a few years ago, they just started recording their daily lives on Xiaohongshu, and recently they have started selling stuff.
Yes.
And some of the sales is staggering. I mean,
Yes.
like one person is selling like 500,000 RMB worth of like trinkets every month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. But I mean, from a standpoint, right, Xiaohongshu's live streams, right, are actually, as I understand, on operating margin basis, a lot more sustainable for Xiaohongshu, because they don't have to do that much price support. Because at least for just that audience, right, on Xiaohongshu, right, it's all about seeing other people in other countries and also maybe potentially buying things from them, right? And that has always been Xiaohongshu's thing, right, from the start, right, being effectively a travel log.
And I was actually talking to a friend yesterday. She came to the office, a friend of mine who used to be a VC investor in Beijing. And since the pandemic, she built a cosmetic brand out of Shanghai. And I was asking her, isn't that a very red ocean, right? It's very competitive and stuff. She said, no, I mean, I started doing Xiaohongshu. I have a good following and I'm profitable every month.
Yeah.
I don't spend almost anything on marketing.
Yeah.
I just spend on content creation. Sometimes I would do a bit of live. And she said, if I went to Douyin, things would have been very different. I would have to spend probably a lot on
Yes.
marketing. Yeah.
Yes.
But also she doesn't know that because Xiaohongshu now is trying to focus on commercialization. She doesn't know how long this will last, like this kind of good times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That does make sense.
Well, we're talking about platforms, maybe because, we're talking about Xiaohongshu. Xiaohongshu is more prevalently used in China and amongst the Chinese community, right? But in Southeast Asia, it's a little different because not every country here can read Chinese.
Only the Malaysian Chinese use Xiaohongshu.
Singapore also, if they can read Chinese, is very useful. I don't use Xiaohongshu because I cannot read Chinese, but in Southeast Asia, the platforms that we look at most often when talking about live streaming or live commerce is TikTok Shop, Facebook as well, right? So how do you compare these two in terms of the live streaming space in Southeast Asia?
Let me also add a second layer of this question. I've been talking to lots of investors, and of course, from investors' point of view, one question that people are always debating is that is it worth for Shopee to subsidize live so much? Because I think in Q3 last year, I think almost all their sort of subsidies and went into live. So that was a big bet.
I think it's a bit of a moot question.
It's a what?
It's a bit of a pointless question.
Yeah.
Not to be rude here,
Yeah.
but it's not a bet. It's they have to make this investment to continue to maintain parity against TikTok. That's my point of view here, right? Because if they don't invest in it, if they don't try to grow the Shopee live space at all, right, TikTok will take the pie. I mean, maybe not 80, 90, 100%, but I'm saying significant enough to make them sit up. Before there was that regional decision by Shopee, right, to actually do something about their live, right? Their live streams were okay, right? You had a lot of precious stones, a lot of geomancy and everything. Nothing that most people actively want to watch or buy, except the kind of the fanatical few who actively want to buy. So if TikTok invests in live stream and uses live selling or live commerce as the primary pioneer to open up for their TikTok shop experience, right, Shopee inevitably has no choice but to invest in it. Otherwise, TikTok will take away the bulk of the audience.
So you mean that for them, there was not much of a choice, right? They had to do it. I mean, whether it's efficient or not, this is something that they can figure out along the way. Or,
Yes.
or maybe they can't figure out, we don't know, but there was no strategic choice that to do it or not to do it.
Yes. It's really inevitable. That's what I'll say. It's a very simple parallel will be Taobao Live versus Douyin.
Taobao started earlier.
Taobao started earlier,
Yeah.
right? And then Douyin came and took quite a big chunk of the pie away from them. And Taobao now is stuck in this race, right? They can't stop investing in it because Douyin won't stop investing in it. It's a Mexican standoff. And that's the same situation that they are both in right now.
There's another choice that Shopee can potentially make, which is to convince ByteDance that it's not worth investing in e-commerce in Southeast Asia. But I think that's a difficult proposal.
Either way requires investing a huge amount of money, right? It's still, I mean, different outcomes, different strategic ends, but it still starts with the same means. Investing a huge chunk of money in it, raising the CAC, right? And having some sort of moats effectively to have lower CAC than TikTok. But I don't think that's ever humanly possible because TikTok doesn't have to spend a marketing budget on TikTok Shop.
But TikTok has to do this internal calculation, right? The ROI that, okay, I put on live. But of course, eventually, in a situation like what we have in China, the MCNs, the live sellers, they pay a lot more to TikTok in terms of advertising budget as compared to the commission they pay to Douyin, for example. So maybe that made TikTok realize that, okay, I have to make the e-commerce part big enough so that my advertising sort of income will increase a lot because there are lots of people trying to sell goods. But of course, one argument is that in Southeast Asia, there aren't that much supply. There aren't that many suppliers. So we will not reach a situation with thousands of different suppliers fighting for the same audience. And each of them would have to either cut the price or pay a lot of advertising dollars to Douyin or both.
By suppliers here, you mean merchants on the platform?
Merchants on the platform.
Merchants on the platform.
Merchants, and the merchants could be sellers, could be MCNs, could be, I mean, in certain instances, what Douyin is actively promoting now is manufacturers doing their own live streams.
I take the other point of view, the other half of this argument here, right? Merchants were always multi-home.
Always what?
Multi-home. Right? They will sell on whichever platform is able to give them the kind of volume and traffic.
True.
Even if it doesn't cost them anything to host, because putting a product that is free, right? There are no listing fees. No one dares to actually put listing.
But doing it actively live, there's a cost.
Yes. Yeah. So that is where multi-streaming comes in, right? There are all number of SaaS solutions out there that allow multi-streaming across TikTok Live, across Shopee Live at the same time. They will still actively seek to pursue that kind of multi-streaming, multi-homing, rather than committing all in on any single platform. Right? So I don't think it's likely that it will ever hit the point where TikTok says the ROI is no longer worthy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How about Facebook Live? Because I mean, we compare TikTok to Douyin and Shopee to Taobao, right? But of course, there's also a player in this region that doesn't close the loop, but there's quite a few live streams going on there, which is Facebook Live. So where do you think?
Are they a player?
Are they?
I don't know.
Will you count? But people do streams on Facebook. They just have to close the loop somewhere else.
There's one thing I've been curious for a long time. Is there anybody at Facebook who is actually in charge of Facebook Live?
I spent 4 years trying to engage with Facebook. I haven't found that person yet.
Okay. So which means that it's a product that's on Facebook?
And I'm a Upmesh was a Meta investee. We had $500,000 from Meta.
Okay.
And we still couldn't find that one person who was in charge of Facebook Live.
So, how does that work? So you have this product, you have the ecosystem around it, and nobody from Facebook is in charge of engaging with this ecosystem.
Because they have broken themselves down into functional lines, right? So if, for example, if it's about chat and monetization through chatbots, WhatsApp for business and all that, yes, you have a team there that's actively building it, growing it out. Right? But Facebook Live as a thing, I have yet to find that person. It could be my own efforts are not good enough, but I've yet to find that person who actively does anything about it. Because when you look at Facebook Live as a customer, to you it's an experience, right? It's a live stream, there's something to watch, somebody must be the product owner. I'm sure somebody is.
I'm sure that at least there's somebody who's in charge of the product and the tech aspect of it, at least maintaining it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But under that one product, they carve out the functional line of messaging. So every live stream, you have comments and everything that falls under messaging. So there's a separate functional group that's looking after that. So you don't genuinely have one person who's taking charge of the entire Facebook Live product as is.
So as a result of that, do you think that the ecosystem around Facebook Live is evolving in very interesting ways? Maybe unrelated parallel. So Ant Group, Alibaba's digital financial services affiliate, they invested in a digital wallet in Pakistan. For a long time, it was not performing until the pandemic hit. You know what happened? They couldn't send anyone from China to that business. So for a few years, that business was left to whoever was there to manage, and the business started performing exceptionally well. There's no KPI associated to that.
Which I choose not to comment. Right, because there's Lazada and all that can tell us. I'll give us very similar examples. Facebook Live.
So obviously, I understand, Facebook's not monetizing that, right? So
I don't think they will monetize that.
So you don't have to pay for advertising to get your live stream viewed by more people. I think distribution is done in a different way, the distribution of traffic. Yeah. And you don't pay a commission to Facebook because they don't close the loop. So Facebook is essentially not monetizing that directly, at least.
Yeah. So a bit of war stories here. When TTS first entered the picture,
TikTok Shop,
TikTok Shop first entered the picture, they only had two key sales to all live sellers. Number one, no admin fee or low admin fee of about 1%, right? Shipping will be free. That was the first selling point. Second selling point was that they would deliver traffic to you. These two selling points, Facebook then and Facebook now, still has no means of combating whatsoever. But having said that, right, Facebook Live will always be a thing. Facebook Live will always be an impediment to the growth of Shopee Live and TikTok Live, no matter what, because it will always remain free. If you really are so stuck in your ways and you only want to do Facebook Live, you don't even want to pay MDR, you still can build a large enough business around it, right? Even here in Singapore, which you would think people are more advanced or more modern in thinking, I know some MCNs doing 150, 200K of GMV, USD or GMV a month, right? And still no payment gateway.
So they just purely use Facebook Live?
Purely Facebook Live, payment collection through PayNow. No payment gateway, no...
So manual payment collection?
Yes.
Okay.
And they are doing between 50, 60,000 orders a month and still no payment gateway. They refuse to use payment gateway because to them the 2.8% is not worth spending on.
And also because, the effort to actually process all these payments manually is not as high as I mean, for them to be painful, they say, I need an automated solution, which costs me.
It is because they have to hire one whole person whose job is just to look at the bank account and tally it against every invoice that's sent out. So one human being who just doing that every day, right? That's their so-called cost of doing things, which in the long run actually is, I think, quite expensive for them.
But I mean, if you pay 2.8%, I mean, if you do like 200K, I mean, that would be
5,600.
That would cost more than a junior admin person who's meticulous.
So that's their thinking. So that junior admin person, the whole job and all that. Of course, I've seen it break down in execution in a lot of ways, right? Junior admin person after 2 months says, this is crap, I don't want to do it anymore.
So tiring.
Then you have to find another junior admin person and all that. Or the junior admin person starts to think evil thoughts of, oh, shucks, actually there's this much money in the bank account. How do I get some of it for myself?
Yeah.
Right? Or they try to change the PayNow code. I've seen all iterations of versions of this. Stupid ways of doing things, right? I've seen all iterations and versions of these things. So I'm still on the side of payment gateway. It's not a simple like dollar to dollar kind of calculation. But no matter what, you can still build a business down there. And so that means that if, for example, right, like recently TTS raised admin fee to up to 6.5%, right? Shopee Live is somewhere around 10%. It will be a drag on them to continue to raise because no matter what, Facebook Live is always going to be free. You can't jump it up to 15%, right? Because if you jump it up to 15%, then, well, there's the other option, which is 0%. Right? And of course, I've heard this argument before all the way from TTS time, which is that we can give you traffic. No matter what, we can give you traffic, right? In the early days when they first started, they promised for every 1 hour, I think it was between 80 to 100,000 visits per stream. That's what they will always sell. The problem here with that, okay, so two separate problems with that. The first problem is that it's a de facto part of people's lives, right? People have, at least depending on country, right? For example, Philippines and Vietnam and some parts of Indonesia as well. People already have this habit of using Facebook as their sort of WeChat. It's their messaging, it's their social updates, it's their bulletins board. Right? Everything that is posted on TikTok, they also make sure to post it on Facebook. Right? So it is a kind of part of their daily life. This part of the traffic will never leave. Right? In fact, so much so to the extent that I was curious, so I personally went down into the co-working spaces and everything and just spy on people's computers. I'm a bit creepy that way, forgive me. Right? Almost all of them tend to have Facebook open, well, at least on one tab on their computer because it's their default messaging and updates and everything else. So no matter what you can promise of the traffic, Facebook will also be able to promise it, just that they won't be able to manually trigger it. Plus, there's the Facebook algorithm. I don't know what they call it. My own way I call it is rule of 50, which is once you have crossed a certain size, I think a few thousand followers, every live stream, you are basically going to get a minimum of 50 viewers. So if anybody leaves the stream and starts viewing, they'll keep driving more traffic over to you again and again until you hit back to 50 again or more. So no matter what, right, Facebook still is, I mean, it's a threat, but it's still there. So that's the first reason. The second reason is on TikTok, when you drive more and more traffic over to that, the difficulty then, and I think to some extent now, is that the conversions aren't great. Right? The conversions aren't great. You are seeing a lot of, okay, they drop in, they watch 5 minutes, and they drop out. Right? I can't claim to have the data or the numbers from the TikTok side to prove it. Everything I'm saying here is just anecdotal based on the live streamers that I work with who are selling on TikTok and all that. Right? But it's a very different audience behavior as well. Right? On Facebook, for instance, Facebook, you can go and do a live streaming for long periods of time because more or less the audience that drops in within the first 10 minutes will more often than not stay on for at least an hour or more. Right? And during this period of time, you can keep talking to them, you can keep selling to them, and keep increasing their basket size. But TikTok, their experience is very different. More or less, they need to take it as a given that every 7 to 10 minutes, that audience is swapping out. So they can't do the usual method, they can't increase ABS and everything, they just have to count on increasing selling to the new audience is coming, new audience is coming, new audience coming. And the conversion rate for that is not that great.
So the MCNs we visited in China, we have visited a lot over the last quarter or so. Actually, over the last half a year, many of them are telling us is that the operations become more and more refined, right? Down to the second level. So every second, TikTok, Douyin will give them the live sort of traffic information, and based on that, they either have to, or actually probably both, right? They have to get the hosts to engage at like every 3-second levels. So if like there's like 3 seconds of downtime, people switch out.
Yes.
This is one thing. And second, obviously, is the advertising. So they give you the sort of the real trend of traffic down to the second level, and you can decide on the spot saying that, hey, I want to push to more people, and I want to pay a bit. I just like step on the pedal, right? Accelerate that, put a bit of fuel, and then more people will watch. So as a result, like lots of money inadvertently go to Douyin because people want to sell more, and as long as the ROI is okay, they want to do more. But of course, that's on China's scale, right?
Yeah, that's definitely China's scale. Right. You don't get the kind of granularity, for sure. You don't get the kind of granularity on Facebook. On TikTok as well, as I understand so far, and having observed 1 or 2 live streams, that sort of granularity isn't present yet as well. It may be a very Douyin specific phenomenon, but it doesn't exist so far yet here. Yeah.
So just to summarize a little bit.
Sorry, I just want to bring up one more point. So we were talking about audiences and conversion, right? I do believe that TikTok, if I had to put money on it, I would bet that TikTok knows they have this problem. Because for the past 2 years, their strategy has not changed. Going to Facebook and IG sellers and giving them tons of money, giving their buyers tons of money to drag them onto TikTok to start buying there. This hasn't changed. This hasn't stopped. And it's still leaking back out. They are still going back to these Facebook sellers and still convincing them to go back onto TikTok, right? Many of these sellers are actually just arbitraging between the two platforms. If this month price support is good, I'll go on TikTok. If this month price support is not good, okay, I'll stay on Facebook instead, right? Because the whole process for the customers is very laborious. Plus, there's no real guarantee of conversion.
So when that happens, do you think that, how would you think that TikTok would find, what kind of formula they would have eventually for these people to actually stay on TikTok Shop? Or, what needs to be done?
What?
That's like a multi-billion-dollar question.
Yeah. I don't dare to say too deeply because I don't know the inner workings of TikTok and what they are doing, right? For all I know, they might already know this or they might already have their own plans. But from an outsider point of view, I would say the first thing they need to do is grow the audience. They have the users, they have the MAU, they have the MAU, they have the DAU. That one, no doubt, no debate, right? I think they need to grow the audience.
What do you mean by growing the audience? They already have the users, right? And they have been trying to convert these users into e-commerce users.
They need to grow the audience to be more accustomed to buying from live, to actively enjoy watching live. Right now, the entire process, what I feel so far, when I went with you, for example, to Shenzhen, right, and I see from the China point of view what a live stream looks like, what it feels like, right? When I watch it on my WeChat, when I borrow on my friend's phone to watch his Douyin, the quality is very different. And the quality matters because right now, the quality of all the live streaming being done on TikTok, even Shopee Live, is just one camera, one man, I have this thing, explain, it's very good for you. Are you going to buy? Please buy. Right, next one. This thing I have is very good for you, please buy. It is a vast difference from the kind of engagement, thought, right, creative, production value, etc. that goes into a Chinese live stream, where you actually actively get engaged, right, or we will say 入神, right, and you feel like, wow, it's very interesting, it's very exciting, I want to continue watching it. That is a very big game changer in trying to get people used to buying from live commerce. Whereas right now, everything on live commerce, nothing about it leaks out at you to say that I, as a viewer, I, as a buyer, I actively want to buy something from this, right? There's nothing. There's no reason for me to stay in the first place, much less give you the time to convince me that I should trust you, that I should be buying any of these products from you.
I think in China, I mean, the content to what is there. I mean, if you look at some of like the streamers, the MCs, they put lots of effort in production, right? I mean,
Yes.
Some of them hire the best talent from TV stations, from studios.
Yes.
For like not the live studios, but from the sort of production studios of TV programs, movies, to help them with the content. I mean, the Sunshine MC we visited in what's that? Guangzhou. Yeah,
Guangzhou.
in Guangzhou, like almost the entire like the core team came from like TV background.
Yes.
And Joy Media, one of the top ones in Hangzhou. Like all the senior management came from Phoenix TV, which is one of the like largest satellite TV stations in China. So I was told that the content is so good, or has to be engaging because of two reasons. I mean, first is that production of video content sort of predates the live commerce era. I mean, there was lots of entertainment live in China, which we already of some quality. And second is that in China, precisely it comes to the point of there are so many people competing in every sector. So, and as a result, the traffic becomes more and more expensive. I mean, platform charges you for the traffic. As a result, how can you differentiate? And multiple people I've talked to who are actually running MC, and they said content is the only way nowadays. You have to have content that's novel.
So here's the funny thing, and it is not unheard of, at least in the Singapore context. I don't know so much about Malaysia or Thailand, right? But it's not unheard of in the Singapore context for these so-called TV celebrities to come out to do their own live selling. In fact, I can point you at two right now. There's M Dada by, I can't remember the name, Michelle Chia, I think, Michelle.
Do you know who that is?
I don't know any Singaporean celebrities. Wrong audience. sorry.
Young people
Wrong
problem.
audience, yeah,
Young
wrong
people
audience,
problem.
wrong audience.
Right.
I don't know either, but yeah.
Right. But these were when I was young, which was before you were born. Thank
You know
you.
Pashu Khan, right?
I know. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for reminding me how old I am. Right? But when we were young, these were all the mainstay. You always see them on like Channel 5 or Channel 8 or whatever, right? And they came out and they started doing live selling. So there's M Dada. Ben Yo has one as well, which is listed on the second board of SGX, right? And then you have the third one, which is Sibei Shop by Terence Chow and his group, right? They are all coming out and doing this. But somehow they don't seem to have brought out the lessons from creating content or whatsoever that you are telling me that, all these Sunchain and Joy Group have learned. They are not. They're still doing it like, okay, maybe they just have a bit of a better studio setup, maybe more investment in the equipment and everything. But in terms of content, it's just not there.
Oh, because they're actors. They're not the producers and creators of content. And celebrity actors that are used to a certain style of acting, and which might be different from what is required or what is engaging in terms of having a live audience.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe the sitcom actors would be better than the movie actors.
Do like a bit of improv.
Yeah, improv. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It is possible as well, but I don't know. I think maybe the sample size is too small for me to speak with more conviction on it.
So one of the MCs who are going to visit in the next live immersion in Hangzhou is Yowan, right? Yowan signs a lot of celebrities.
Yes.
And we went to some of their studios, and we listened to one of the co-founders explaining to us. It was quite funny because the first thing they said that because nowadays there are so many people who made, so many hosts who made horrendous amount of money on live.
Yeah.
There are many TV celebrities, they want to be part of that, especially those who still have a following, right?
Yeah.
Someone they recently signed was someone who was famous in the early 1990s for a TV show, and you can guess the average age of their her co-audience, and she wants to do it. But the challenge is that first, you need to create a setting for them to be able to perform. So, which means that they can't do it alone. You need to have someone next to them. So, quite often, they can engage with the audience. The other can supplement with the product information, with sort of the emotional engagement and stuff. So, just leave it to TV celebrity alone. Quite often, it's not enough because unless they are willing to sort of change the way they engage, which is a risky game. Which is a risky game. Especially when you're like in your 50s, right? It's hard.
I actually have 2 points of view, 2 separate observations on getting celebrities to sell, right? The first observation I've had is that they can't sell. They don't have that skill set, right? Because selling is more than just, it's about that live engagement, it is that two-way interaction, that convincing of them. They don't have that, they've never had to do that. Their entire professional career has been reading off a script and looking at the camera and letting it record them. So they don't know how to do that interaction. So that's the first observation. Second observation I've made is that, and this is really going out on a hypothesis here, buyers see them as aspirational figures, right? Like George Clooney, if he sells, like George Clooney, when you buy...
You know who George Clooney is, right? Okay.
Like when George Clooney endorses, say, Nespresso, right? He's endorsing everything about it, the feel that goes together with an espresso and everything is aspirational. But generally, more or less, when you're doing live streaming, if it's a more unknown brand, right, that kind of aspirational doesn't really play much of part. It's about convincing them of why this thing is important to them. And that is also a second area where I think audiences generally don't really have that kind of trust in them to be able to sell it.
So it's hard for them to create this kind of relatability.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's very strange. I've seen it in Singapore, I've seen it in Philippines, haven't seen it in Malaysia yet or Thailand.
Well, in China, what we see that how Yuan does things is that, okay, if one celebrity comes to sign, they do this. It's slightly differentiated, but essentially it's the same methodology as if they have a new KOL fresh out of university, whatever they train them up. Is that they will quickly assess what this person is strong at, and maybe strong at a niche product, strong at a niche audience, strong at a niche set of like demonstration skills, and then they will basically get that person to specialize.
But that's China. The scale is different.
So we specialize. So one of the studios we went to in Yuan is that is one like minor TV celebrity, and they realized, okay, that person is only somehow. They don't know why. They just figure out, right? But they don't bother to explain exactly why. They probably don't need to, right? And so it's really good at selling this specific brand, the specific line. So they just create a studio of that person for this brand and for this line.
So actually that's also a very important thing that you brought up, right? It is the level of ecosystem infrastructural support, right? If you are a new KOL, exactly like you just mentioned, you're a new KOL, minor TV celebrity, you're entering this space, there are people who are more experienced than you, who are experts in this field, who are able to guide you and teach you. This thing does not exist in Southeast Asia at all, right? Everybody is just feeling their way forward together and copying from each other. Yeah.
So I have a question. So you say like somebody needs to know what to do. Who do you think should know? The platforms? Are we talking about the brands who want to do live sellings or the MCNs in the region?
Candidly, in Southeast Asia, I think everyone's just feeling their way forward. Very candidly, I think everyone's just feeling their way forward. There is one seller in Singapore called Queen J. She's one of the TTS top sellers right now, started in Facebook Live. She and her husband spent 8 years in China, right, during the Zhibo boom and everything. Right, and they believed that they can import all those techniques from China into Southeast Asia, into Singapore context, and sell and earn tons of money. They were correct for a while, maybe 6 months. In that 6 months, everybody else copied what they were doing, and that's it. The competitive advantage faded away, right? And then all it did was everybody learned how to copy them, do the same thing, everybody grows their GMV, and then they are all back to the same, market share vis-a-vis each other all over again.
So which means that whatever they learn that's demonstrable is superficial, right? And it doesn't create enough sort of advantage over the others.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So really here, why I'm bringing this up again, and why everybody's market share more or less remains the same, is back to the question that you asked me way back. What's the first thing to do? Get the audience first, right? Everybody is just fighting for the same audience. Back in Upmesh, I ran this study. The name of the study is a bit incorrect lah. It's a bit politically incorrect. I called it the bias Latina study. Because
what?
Bias Latinus study.
Okay.
Right, because we wanted to see, because we had unique customer IDs for every single buyer that executes a checkout, right, on any one of the sellers that we're supporting. So what we did was we tried to see on average, how many buyers, right? Each buyer they're watching on average, how many of these live sellers. Number is somewhere around 2.6, 2.7. That's pretty much it, right? And the entire unique number of buyers that we were servicing at a time, 50, 60,000. That's only what 1% of Singapore's population, right? It's a far cry. It's a far cry. Every time a new seller emerges or what have you, they are still fighting for the same 50, 60,000. Right? Probably has grown quite a bit with the investments from Shopee Live and TikTok Live and everything, right? But it comes down to that. So you ask me, sorry, going off on a tangent, how should they fight and win over audience monopoly? Fight and win over traffic monopoly?
How to do that?
That's a great question. I think the type and intent of the audience matters. If a Shopee buyer is on Shopee, their tendency and their preference to buy, right, the propensity to purchase is already higher than TikTok. How you go further from that into, monetizing it further or drawing more of their traffic further, I'll let them decide around it. But I think that there is quite a vast difference between the two of them. But that precondition for that monopoly and why this monopoly can take place is because when people who are viewing live streams, right, they are not going to multi-home and find new places to view live streams. It's always going to be just that one usual platform that they are used to. Right? So there is that opportunity or that advantage there that they can each start to kind of capture that audience.
And if you look at the experience from China, there are two types of things which draw a lot of sales, right? First is obviously big brands giving very, very big discounts, right? Li Jiaqi VR, they were able to command like huge discounts from the brands, and naturally these kind of things will sell. And it creates something self-fulfilling, right? Brands know that, okay, I can get sales from this host, and the host charge me a hefty sort of placement fee, which is like a branding budget. So brands are willing to pay for it. In fact, some of the smaller brands are willing to pay for it because it sort of gets them the visibility. Less so now, but for a few years, smaller brands use this to basically get the audience because nobody else has 10 million people, 15 million people watching. And this is something that platform didn't like, right? This is too much power from one host. If that host deplatforms and goes somewhere else, then it's hard to replicate that kind of audience, right? For the same platform. We don't see that happening in Southeast Asia, right? We don't see anybody who can command lots of sales, the celebrity.
Because the audience is not there yet, right? The audience is just not there yet. No matter what, the primary blocker to whatever is happening here, and this is the only thing that I think really either the enablers or the platforms can do, is to expand the audience of live. That is the holy grail here. Not the holy grail of chasing after more sellers and everything, but the holy grail is going after that audience.
How should brands or how should platforms or enablers go after this? Push the live video.
Hey, this answer can earn a lot of money on it. This answer can earn a lot of money.
You can give 10% of the answer, the other 90%.
The other 90% you just share with us.
I think
He's thinking which 10%.
I think the first most important thing is to improve the quality. Everything else is secondary, right? Once in a while, I watch Shopee Live. I watch TikTok Live a lot more, right? But the quality of the live between both of them is equally bad.
Okay.
When you say quality, you mean content-wise, entertainment-wise?
Content, entertainment, on-screen personality, production value, right? I can recognize a strategy which is just get a warm body in front of a camera and stream. We can't predict. This is my hypothesis or what the strategic thinking behind it, which is we can't predict who's going to be a star. So we don't bother predicting. We put 10,000, 50,000 live streamers. Whoever goes up, right? We leaderboard this. Whoever goes up, we drive more traffic to them. That's my prediction, my hypothesis of how they're planning and thinking about it.
But isn't what that TikTok Shop wanted to do, right? Supporting the sellers, supporting the MC, and supporting the host, building ecosystem. Are you saying that they are supporting, in a way not exactly sort of accurate way of support that they are giving? Because, they've been giving lots of support to get people onto the platform. They've been giving lots of support in terms of price, shipping, and whatever. So what are you saying that maybe they should just purchase bulk of professional sort of production, quality equipment and build studios to support?
Yes, that is That's okay. To me, that's bare minimum already, right? So the heavy investment, like as I understand, TikTok is actively buying warehouses, right? What will also make a huge difference is start actively buying proper studio facilities, right? Whole complex like what we see in China, Indonesia also has quite a lot already, right? Actively buying that and then improving the production quality. That's the first. The second is actually giving them a playbook to actively say, okay, this is how you're going to do it. Yeah. I don't know how they're doing it in Indonesia, to be very upfront with you, because I haven't executed for TikTok in Indonesia whatsoever, everything. But
I think for TikTok in the early days, one thing they did is that they actually encouraged, Douyin's top MCN's top sort of teams to actually, even some of the brands, to basically go to Indonesia because they know that, okay, these guys have already made money from Douyin. And I know a few of them personally. They don't find it very challenging in Indonesia because they said, okay, we have a playbook in China. Indonesia, we know that, okay, we sort of figured out this playbook doesn't exactly work. Yeah. So for instance, Indonesia is one thing. When I go to the US, it's even worse, right? I sign 10 hosts. I expect everybody to report to work at 8 a.m. or whatever, 7 p.m. They don't show up. So that kind of thing, which for them is that, okay, they have a process, they have a playbook in China, and it's just for whatever reason, when it comes to people, comes to organizations, stuff, it just doesn't work exactly with the same way. And that creates problems for them.
This is normal. I have worked back at Upmesh's peak, live sellers. We worked with live sellers across 4 countries, right? I tell you, working with live sellers is an art in emotional management. You will learn emotional management like never before because it can be incredibly frustrating at times. So I share with you a personal war story, right? Back then when we were trying to figure out how to kickstart additional monetization by doing brand connection, like giving them access to brands, supporting them, providing them goods and everything. We were trying to find every lever that could work, even if it was not profitable on a gross margin basis, we were still going to do it. We were actively paying streamers, these live sellers, to go overseas and stream from there. There was one that sticks out in my mind till today. A Malaysian team, 2 separate MCNs, we paid cash money for them to go to Japan to stream. So, first day, guai, they will sell what we put in front of them.
Guai means obedient.
Yeah. We won't really say obedient, it means more like
do their job.
aligned, right? Second day, still okay. The third day, they disappeared. We paid for their trip, we paid air ticket, we paid their hotel, we paid a little additional on top of that, and they disappeared. They went radio silent, couldn't contact them, couldn't call them. They went radio silent, and then later on, when we only found out where they are, when they started doing live streaming from Don Don Donkey. Not 1 day, but 2, 3, 4 days. And to them, the way they see it is very simple. And this is globally across all Southeast Asia, right? All the live sellers see it the same way. What you want is what you want. But if what you want is not going to profit me to the level that I expect to be able to profit, I'm just not going to listen. What can you do to me? Right? For 2 separate reasons, The first reason is this. You can sign a contract. How much does it cost you to enforce the contract? They recognize it. They are not entirely stupid, right? They recognize that it's going to cost you more to enforce the contract than to just ignore them. So they will ignore, and they generally ignore all contracts. I've seen this. I've had my own contracts broken before, and no choice, there's nothing we can do about it. The second reason is that they know if you try to do or enforce anything about it, they have 10, 20,000 viewers. They just go live and complain about you.
I think that's the issue that the Chinese MCNs going to the US are facing. So
yes.
There's nothing they can enforce.
There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
There's nothing you can do about it. The only solution that I have found over time, and this one I should be charging money for, right, is to work with a broad enough base. You set your failure rate to be higher than what you're used to. You set a broad enough base so that at least you have the minimum number of streams and connections going out.
I actually sort of just going off tangent, related point. I've been talking to lots of manufacturers in China over the last year who are expanding their manufacturing base to Vietnam, to Cambodia, to different parts of Southeast Asia, and increasingly over the last 2 years to Mexico and Turkey. Quite a few people told me that Mexican workers are much harder working compared to Southeast Asians. And I don't know exactly what's the reason. And they said Mexican workers are as productive and sometimes more productive than Chinese workers. Not because they're smarter or whatever, but they just work all the hours they're supposed to work, and they work longer hours. And one person who has built factories in, I think, Indonesia and Mexico, both, I mean, to obviously circumvent different kind of export rules, was telling me that his theory about why Mexican workers are harder working is that they are building the factories near the US border. So basically the workers you hire there are not locals. They're migrants from different parts of Mexico. And they said, and whereas, I mean, in certain parts of, say for Vietnam, certain parts, I mean, Vietnamese workers are already considered hardworking in Chinese standards. They said, I mean, the workers we hire are from neighboring sort of towns, neighboring villages. And the motive of people who work in their neighborhood is very different from the motive of people who actually take the active step to migrate and in search for a better life. Migrants are willing to put much longer hours and work much harder. I mean, I'm not sure whether there's like a relation there.
I do agree. Firstly, there is already that natural filtering effect, right? If you're motivated enough to move, you will want to do anything that you can to make it succeed, right? But I think the other half of it is general expectations around work or corporate culture, right? So, for example, like in Indonesia, the expectations, 5 p.m. means sometime today. You know? I mean, you were operating in Indonesia, you know what I mean? EOD means sometime today, right? Malaysia, EOD means sometime today if I come to work, right? And it's more relaxed, right? The kind of hard-hitting, this day, this timeline, that kind of discipline within the corporate culture doesn't really exist. Even in Philippines, for example, right? Philippines is just, okay, I'll tell you I'll do it for you by 10. You are lucky if you get answer by today. Right? That kind of corporate culture, the expectation, the execution discipline doesn't exist.
I mean, there are sort of historical reasons for that. But actually,
I need to bring us back to live comms.
yes.
Where are we going?
Come back to the live commerce. So one question is that because whichever sector, I mean, in Southeast Asia, you see like commerce, I mean, you see like lots of people talking about it, you see lots of like people doing it. But at the end of the day, it's still not as competitive as what you see in China.
No, it's not.
But also because the market is so segmented, I don't know whether you could argue that it would ever reach that kind of competitive level.
It will if we hit 30%. So 30% of e-com transactions being through live, it will hit that level, right? I'm using that as a benchmark because that's the benchmark from China, where it's becoming competitive. The difficulty is, the reason why it still doesn't feel so competitive is because the market is still very small. So more or less everybody knows each other, right? Even within the live sellers, the MCNs, all more or less everyone still knows each other. They still talk to each other. But if you study anything about industrial economics history and all that, the moment that industry size grows large enough to be worth it, right? When you have new entrants, right? That clubby atmosphere will disappear. That's when the competition will kick in. So we hit 30%, it will become competitive. I'm very sure of this.
But will we hit that? Because, I mean, it's kind of chicken and egg, right? Sort of, you need enough input for it to reach a critical mass. And after a critical mass, things evolve on its own.
That's why a lot depends on what happens in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether or not investments are made in, as well as investments are made in the right direction to grow the audience, to improve host quality, to make brands more familiar with live and more willing to do live, right? These three things need to come together.
So that investment comes from the platforms, and who else?
The platforms, the brands themselves need to do the investment. The MCNs also need to do the investment. Right now, and this is part of a larger problem with live commerce, right? Because the barrier to entry for live commerce is actually zero. You just need a phone, sit there and go live. All the MCNs or the larger agencies that I work with today, right, that's how they all started. Fun fact is, almost all of them are husband and wife teams. Like easily 95% of them all started husband and wife team. The wife is the talent, the husband is on the back end doing payment collection and everything. All are like that across Southeast Asia. God knows why. Right? So because of that, it started to have an image problem. Live commerce started to have image problem because who are the kind of people who willingly say, hey, I want to take this phone and I want to take a video of myself and just keep selling products on a live stream, right? People who generally don't really have options, maybe poorer educational qualifications and all that. Right? So that's the general problem, one overarching problem of live commerce right now, right? That it also becomes this place where only, so to speak, low SES or lower income people watch this thing, only lower income people are selling on this thing. Right? The whole thing needs to change. The MCNs need to upgrade their own image, invest in themselves to upgrade their image. Right? The brands also need to be willing to take a bet and go all in on this. And there are cheap ways that the brands can do this, but the brands are so worried, right? They are more worried about their brand guidelines than about the actual sales performance. So all they are fussing about is, okay, first give me the MCN. And they don't really have the applicable models to know what to apply here, right? Because they're used to working with influencer agencies.
Yeah.
So all the metrics and everything that they're looking at is like number of followers, engagement per post, all this kind of thing, right? They don't even know how to begin to evaluate live commerce, right? Its ROI and so on. So they still apply the same frameworks over to live selling. And they say, okay, all these guys, the brand image don't suit. This one, the brand image don't suit. That one, the brand image don't suit, right?
But for brands, it comes back to, I've spoken a lot with the e-commerce managers from different brands in China, mostly based out of Shanghai. And they said that, many of them told me that, compared to them, their counterparts within the same brand in Southeast Asia are like miles behind in terms of e-commerce thinking and e-commerce action. But that,
Southeast Asia is
Southeast Asia.
Yep.
It's much less advanced, right?
Yes.
For a reason, they said because they don't face that kind of competitive environment that we're facing in China. So in China, the domestic brands, you face international brand.
Yeah.
So domestic brands adjust their price like dynamically. Anytime they can adjust the price.
Yeah.
Domestic brands do like 16 hours of live every day.
Yeah.
Domestic brands undercut us on a lot of fronts. And we're forced to react. We're forced to do it. It's not that we want to do it. Nobody wants to do it unless you're forced to. So, but in China, they don't have a choice. It's just so competitive.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. And actually, this exactly what you said, right? Where these household brands are so household, they can do these, I call it low ROI activities, right? By being more particular and fussy about their brand profile than worrying about things like sales. I'll give you a very simple example, right? Unilever, Nestle, and P&G. Almost any country you go to, Unilever, Nestle, P&G, people will still buy the brand by default because of their brand recognition. It's like, how's Pai Mao sales now in China? Pai Mao, the washing.
No idea. Yeah.
But it should be still a household brand, right? People won't deviate, right? So what it needs to shift is not really the MNCs coming in, I would say, not at that scale yet, but the mid-scale domestic large brands jumping in on board of it, threatening the large MNCs. I think that's only the only way you can see it move. And also it still depends on the company culture and their openness towards life. That's actually quite important.
I think openness can be indigenous. It can also be sort of forced by external competition if you don't have a choice, like the case in China. But that market condition doesn't exist in China. Just look at e-commerce in general, right? How much percentage of e-commerce sales constitute to brand total sales in each country in Southeast Asia? Yeah. Unless there's certain condition which forces you to look at e-commerce more seriously, otherwise e-commerce will always be like an innovation sort of fringe department in a whole brand sort of sales mix in this region.
And that's why I'm all in on live commerce, because live commerce can unseat that. Live commerce, for the first time, there's an actual track, because the actual track comes, you are Unilever, P&G, or whatever, right? You spend literally millions a month on advertising. It's not just about the advertising that you spend, right? In countries like Philippines or Vietnam, and I think China as well, right? If you join one of these big MNCs, it's like, wow, you've made it, it's a badge of honor. So it's so entrenched within the society. But for the first time ever, live commerce is allowing all these unknowns, right, upstarts to basically say, hey, actually, just try it. Because you trust me, you will buy it. And when you try and realize this is a superior product for perhaps a better price point or the same price point.
It allows them an opportunity to break through.
Exactly. Right? So that's why I go back to how can MNCs join it. MNCs won't start with it at first, right? But if a domestic large brand starts doing it, or mid-tier brand starts doing it, even nibbling away at their sales, at some point they will realize.
So maybe the last question for this podcast. So are you optimistic about the future of live commerce in Southeast Asia? Do you think that if let's say the brands do what they can, the platforms help to support, do you believe that live commerce in Southeast Asia can grow to be very big? Let's say hit that 30%.
Well, to start with, I really spent 4 or 5 years of my life in this place, and I'm looking at investing more years of my life, so yes.
So yes,
I do believe that live commerce can become big, right? But what there needs to be is true consensus, not sit down in a meeting room and everything, but through the consensus of market movements. The platforms, the enablers, and I'm bucketing MCNs under enablers, and the brands, right, need to come to some sort of realization around not just the value of live commerce, but also how to do live commerce, and also convincing people that they should start buying through live commerce. These 3 things need to take place. And it will be slow. It's not like China. It won't be like China. No way. Right? It's still a bit of a cottage industry right now. But with improved investment in this, improved growing of the audience and everything, it will grow past that. I sincerely believe, right, that we are hitting the tipping point already. We are in the middle of the tipping point already. Right? Just from seeing how extreme some countries are doing live commerce right now. At some point, somebody's going to break. In this little Mexican standoff, somebody's going to break. The moment that equilibrium breaks, right, everybody who is disequilibrated must reach the new equilibrium point around what live commerce is. Somebody will break, and I'm convinced that we are in the middle of the tipping point now.
Do you want to bet? Shopee Live versus TikTok Live, who will win?
I think they will fight each other to a draw.
So you think they'll be stuck at this equilibrium?
Yeah.
No.
And it's good for us. As consumers, as stakeholders, it's good for us, right? Let them keep, investing and pushing against each other. Let them keep investing and doing all this. No one lands the knockout blow. We are fine. We have consumer choice.
Okay, so thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the Impulso podcast, and thank you, Shawn, for joining us for your first ever podcast. So we hope that you guys... Yeah, it's his first. So we hope that you guys enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, do like our podcast and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your preferred podcast platform to stay up to date on the latest happenings and trends in tech, new retail, and the broader digital economy. Thank you, and bye-bye.
Bye-bye.